Welcome to Ed's Not Dead. I'm Robby Dodd. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Mr. C.H. Siddons. Hey, Mr. Siddons.
Hey, what's happening?
Welcome back. Good to see you. More on that in a second. And Peter Crable.
Yes. Hello.
It's good to see you guys. Ed's Not Dead is brought to you by Ed's Not Dead Media, a podcast media company that, get ready, curates high-quality audio stories across a variety of genres. Mr. Siddons, where are you?
I'm at home. I'm still operating on the quarantining, working from home memo.
All right. So for our listeners,
I didn't know that was lifted.
Last episode, I think I floated the idea that we would have our first in-person recording session this next episode. And I was getting done dinner tonight, and I looked out the front side door, and Mr. Crable was pulling up. And I said, "What are you doing?"
With his air mattress.
So
and a sleeping bag.
Yeah. So Mr. Crable's here, and we're recording with a terrible echo that hopefully listeners can't hear because we just put our audio together at the last minute. And for the benefit of our listeners, Mr. Siddons, you are on Zoom, but we still have you.
That's right.
Apparently,
and two things can be true at once, right? Where it's either both of us weren't listening, or it just didn't. I just didn't pay attention.
Apparently, I took the conversation literally that we would literally get together in person,
right?
Not figuratively, I guess.
I do have to say, CH, I did feel a little bit better when the text came through from you and said at 7 that you were on Zoom waiting for us, because usually aren't I the one that just is not on the same page mostly? So I wasn't alone this time.
And I emailed you the link right away.
When I said to Robby, I said, I think he knows. I said, I texted him to ask whether we should use one microphone or whether I should bring all the equipment over. And he was like, no, we can't do that. It'll sound terrible. So I was I think he understood.
Listen, what you said was, do you think we can record on Zoom in person? And I said, no, definitely not.
For our upcoming in-person.
You didn't add that.
That was a subtext. That was the parens at the end of that.
There's no parens.
All right. Well, we are doing it. Welcome to the show, everyone. We are glad that you're here. We have a great show planned tonight. As always, you can find us at Ed's Not Dead PC on Twitter. Tweet us, and we will tweet you back. And check out the website, edsnotdead.com. Tonight, we are excited to have an interview with Sebastian Turbot, who's the CEO and Chief Curator of Eco6, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Siddons, is a Canada-based consultancy that guides government, cities, businesses, and civil liberties in a civil society.
That's right.
Creating engaging platforms that turn ideas into action. I think he would be what's known as an influencer, and we're going to talk about influencers in just a little bit.
That's right. It's what we want to be.
So share with the listeners about the WISE partnership and how Sebastian fits into that.
So I came to know Sebastian through the conference on building learning ecosystems a couple of weeks ago that WISE hosted. WISE is an organization based in Qatar and France. And they're really, one of the things that they've been promoting recently is the development of learning ecosystems. And what we're trying to do with our interviews with our friends at WISE is to figure out what are learning ecosystems and why are they positive and good for kids and communities, and how can you get them off the ground and running?
Yeah, especially in the pandemic recovery phase that we're about to enter.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I see the light.
All right. So we're going to be interviewing Sebastian. That's going to be very cool. All right. Before we do that, though, I learned today what a geriatric millennial is. And you two know what geriatric millennials are. I think one of you qualifies and one of you doesn't. So one of you is a geezer millennial. Cue the geezer.
Rich, I can feel the weather in my knees.
My knees and my back.
And one of you is not, and I of course am not. I might be considered a geriatric Gen Xer. So Erica Dhawan has a piece in Index, Why the Hybrid Workforce of the Future Depends on the Geriatric Millennial. So here we go, Mr. Crable. Millennials born between 1980 and 1985 know how to work across generational divides. So the conceit of this is, and I want you two to weigh in on what exactly a geriatric millennial is in your minds, but you straddle this time of phones on the wall and message machines and PCs in your home and what was it called? MySpace. MySpace. Friendster. That you've experienced both those eras. You're comfortable kind of in both of those domains. Leading CEOs in the world right now are considered geriatric millennials. People like Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg. He's 1984. Reddit's Alex Ohanian, 1983. Rent the Runway's Jennifer Fleiss, 1985. And Airbnb's Brian Chesky, 1981. Same as you, Mr. Crabes.
That's right.
So tell me about a geriatric millennial. Do you feel like one, you two?
I would say that I do. We've had this conversation on the show a number of times, and I've always felt like the millennial label wasn't entirely accurate because to me it was, kids that like had cell phones at 10 or something like that. Kids that grew up completely immersed in technology, and maybe that was just my own poor understanding of what a millennial was or my rejection of a label because I'm an individual. Not a label.
I don't subscribe to labels.
That's right. Yeah. But I think the general premise is true in terms of the fact that people my age are a generation that grew up without really any technology or very little technology. And then in our formative years, maybe 10, 11, 12, 13 is when some of the what we would call like modern technology came about, like signing on to Prodigy, using your landline. Yeah. Using your landline or whatever. I remember having one of those early Macs in the house and playing these like ridiculous, utterly stupid games on them. I remember, Oregon Trail, that was another name. The Oregon Trail generation. So anyway, I do think it's a fair label. It's a kind of funny label as well. But I'm down because I do think it kind of hits a specific time and place. You can quibble over the years, 1979, 1987, whatever. But I think in general, I'm down with him, down to be a geriatric millennial.
Yeah, I co-sign that, and I the only thing I'd like to add is I think it allows for the nuance of a generation, which we have a 1981 millennial here, and you, Crable, 85 for me. And then my younger brother, who was born in 1992, is technically considered a millennial, but we could not be more different in our outlook on life, our the way that we grew up with technology, and the way that we interact with others. And I'm not saying in a necessarily a good or bad way, but she calls it almost like uses the label as a micro generation, which I appreciate. We're a subset of a generation with totally different skills in ways that other parts of the generation I think don't.
I kind of, can I be resentful for a second?
You can be as resentful as you want.
I just, this idea that geriatric millennials kind of straddled the almost no technology and then the introduction of technology.
We own that label.
No, I feel like you're stealing that mantle from Gen X a little bit.
Just because you're a forgotten generation doesn't mean you need to,
the article literally only mentions boomers and millennials and Gen Z.
Doesn't mean that you need to hold us accountable for it.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
There are only 40 million of us in the workforce, and there are 70 million of you.
I know you're resentful of my opinions about 80s music, but I've come around. I have a much greater appreciation for 80s music now.
I know you have. So I just want to say that. Oh, Mr. Crable, that echo is killing me. I can't even speak.
Keep going.
Anyway, I'm just going to fight through it. There were TVs in the 70s. That's all we had. And then there were desktops in the 80s. But I guess by the 80s, I was a teenager. So maybe that disqualifies us.
Well, and I don't know. I do think you were still, even in your 20s, I think you're still pretty like malleable in learning. So when a lot of that stuff came out for you, it wasn't like you were so set in your ways and had like
absolutely
so adapted to the typewriter and fax machine that you really had a hard time, and to get to the sort of specifics of the characteristics and labels, which I think is the more interesting part. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that I kind of see and or agree with. I do think that the line that really got to me in terms of geriatric millennials was, they are neither ignorant of technology nor so engrossed in it that a voicemail inspires fear.
Yeah, I love that. I got that quote too.
And, I do think it's taking extremes on either end where, let's just make broad brushes. Gen Z is so face down in social media and their phones and their devices that they can't interact with humans. And baby boomers are so old and technologically incompetent that they can't figure out how to turn a computer on, neither of which is true. But I do think, Casey, I feel like, correct me if this is your experience. Let's just say at work, I'm good with technology. I don't feel particularly knowledgeable about it, but a lot of people come to me that are older and like, wow, you know how to do that? I'm like,
yeah,
I turned it off and on.
Yeah. It's an ego boost.
Yeah. But that kind of like, to me, embolizes it, where when things go wrong, specifically with technology, for some people, I'll just, again, generalizing, that are older, it seems like an intractable problem that they just have no skills to like problem solve.
Well, and honestly, there is between, so millennial is bridging, I think it does bridge this, because we have Gen X and older who look to millennials to troubleshoot, because we have the patience and the wherewithal to actually help them troubleshoot whatever issue they're having. And then you have Gen Z, which I think my younger brother is kind of in this a little bit, where they don't have they don't know how to troubleshoot. They don't know how to fix a problem with technology, because the technology that we have now largely, works. You didn't have to go into the MS-DOS prompt to like figure out what's going on. You didn't have to open up the computer to figure out what was going wrong with the fan or the analog stuff about it. So it's interesting, because the students that I have, they're always on their phones. They're always using technology, but they don't know how to troubleshoot, or don't know how, again, broad brush. They don't know necessarily how to.
Very broad brush. My son, who's a Gen Z, built his desktop upstairs.
Okay, that is a very not.
We're only talking in
for that generation.
But no, I know that's not true. The kids that are really into gaming,
we're literally talking about generations. So we can be general.
The only thing that I would say about Gen Z is that I'm not sure that I can form an opinion on them yet. I don't, supervising people in the workplace. Do I have a Gen Z person that works for me?
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask.
I'm not sure that I do. Maybe a few, but not many. And so the sample size is still very small for me to even paint with a broad brush for Gen Zers. I think everything you're saying about geriatric millennials is true, but then again, the author of the article talks about the lack of comfort with the old telephone.
That was interesting commentary too.
But most of my counseling of millennials has been about pick up the phone and call the person.
Right.
Because when I was training principals, I would have principals. They would send me a thread with a parent that was, 12 responses long, and I would think to myself,
16 paragraphs.
When are you going to pick up the phone and talk to them or ask them to come into the school? So,
and I do sense that with the new teachers with whom I worked, which was their communication with parents and families largely consisted of, I emailed them. Well, that's really not. They're probably not answering that. There's a reason why.
Yeah, and you didn't do that when we worked together. You every year called every parent. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how about this piece about geriatric millennials can teach the traditional communication skills to younger employees and digital body language to older team members? So let's think in terms of ed leadership, organizational development, teams, just the future of the field. What do you think geriatric millennials bring to it?
I think as I've thought about this more, I actually think the teaching of older coworkers and or colleagues, the digital nuances, I think that's actually pretty overblown. Because I was thinking about it, and my parents are both boomers, but we text all the time. They send ridiculous emojis, all the time. So I think 10 years ago, this probably would have been a much more salient point about like, oh, they don't know how to text and all this new stuff. But now I'm like, like the inability to read like digital body language, which was something I never heard before. I don't really think that's true anymore. I think if not on the same playing field, it's pretty close now. That they've adapted, I think, pretty well because it's not new anymore. So I think that part is not necessarily true. I do think the opposite, though, is true of the counseling of younger people coming into the workforce now. I do think that there is some truth to like learning how to, I'll say be professional, but that's not exactly what I mean. But to learn to read people, to converse, to pick up the phone and call them. But at the same time, what 23, 24, 25-year-old comes in fully professional or developed? I think, it's
right.
No matter what.
Yeah.
But yeah,
they need coaching.
Yeah. And so I think it'll be interesting just to see how that plays out as Gen Z does come in, who have spent so much time on technology, right, whether that's actually true or not.
I think I might add that, you all both know that I've spent the last, I guess, 10 to 12 years hiring millennials. I've hired a lot of millennials in my time.
Thanks, Robby.
And I
thank you.
I mean, they're as he looks at his phone. That was the most.
Sorry.
That was not a very authentic.
I apologize.
I just totally called you out. I'm just kidding. No, I mean, I've as many jokes as I make and as much generational banter as we have. It's millennials are the most skilled, smartest, savviest employees to ever hit the workforce in my mind. And I do think geriatric millennials have the ability of having a little bit of that old school Gen X time before technology kind of with itness combined with your really great tech skills and ability to solve problems so quickly.
And I think it endears us to
I think that's going to be helpful.
The older folks. Not old, but like the older folks that we're working with when we were entering the workforce, when I could tell someone that I'm, who's 20 years my senior, and I'm saying I have a record player at home, which I do, I think that sounds silly, but those little things that I can relate on a personal level, the love of listening to music on vinyl, right?
Right.
Whereas it's not something that's a norm, but it's something that can bring people together in a way that maybe wouldn't be otherwise.
But to the author's point, the old folks like me and boomers before us, most of your impact is going to be on those that come after you. And
that's true.
And the people that, the Gen Zers and even younger that you hire, that you develop. So it's that skill set that I just described that I think will lend itself to, building better organizations and schools and such.
It is interesting. In 10 years, we're going to have the conversation about, Casey, how we hired all these Gen Zers.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be incredible to see what they're like.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fascinating.
They're not going to be as good as our generation, but
all right. So just for the record, for the audience, Crable, 1981, Mr. Siddons, 1985.
That's right.
And Dr. Dodd here at 1968.
1968. Well, I remember
2 decades removed.
I remember going to the old Strand movie theater for a nickel.
All right. What's the piece again, Mr. Siddons? Where do you find it?
It's on Medium, and we'll put it in the show notes, but it's called Why the Hybrid Workforce of the Future Depends on the Geriatric Millennial.
All right. It's a good piece, folks. Check it out. When we come back, we are going to be interviewing Sebastian Turbot, the CEO and Chief Curator of Eco6. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Ed's Not Dead. We are so excited to welcome Sebastian Turbot. Sebastian, thanks for coming on the show to talk to us today about learning ecosystems. Excited to have you.
Well, Casey, same here. Really excited to be here and to be here with your audience.
And I have to say, for a plug for our longtime listeners, they'll be very excited to know that you are one of two guests that we've had that have been able to make the connection between Ed's Not Dead and Pulp Fiction. So
there you go.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I became familiar with some of your work and the things that you've been working on through the WISE organization and the conference they had about learning ecosystems just maybe over a month ago. And, we've been talking on our show about learning ecosystems, maybe not in its specifically defined format, but I think it's almost like something that we've talked about in the past, like community schools. So my first question for you is what is a learning ecosystem? It seems like pretty fancy stuff, but can you tell us about learning ecosystem? And if you could also bridge that gap for us with your work with Eco6.
Yeah. I kind of find it always hard to talk about learning ecosystems, or actually to try to define it, because it's at the same time as it's simple and complex. It's like with systems change, it's hard to see the parts from the whole and the whole from the parts. But actually, it's quite simple. And the way we define it with WISE is that learning ecosystems are ecosystems that comprise a diverse combination of learning providers, schools, businesses, community organizations, museums, as well as government agencies. And these organizations try to leverage existing informal and non-formal learning opportunities, or create new opportunities through pathways to success. Also, usually these learning ecosystems are supported by an innovative credentialing system. We'll come back to it probably, like digital badges, for example, and also supported by a technology platform that tries to connect learners with this learning, and to also kind of measure and recognize and certify that learning, that kind of ideally augments the kind of more traditional linear system of, examinations and graduations and tests.
And one of the things that I was thinking about as you're sharing this is something that I grew up with, not experiencing, but in my schools was like vocational schools. And now we're shifting more in the US to we're moving towards like a college and career readiness programs where they're focusing on maybe certifications for healthcare professions, or they're focusing on maybe more like as we called in the past, like vocational skills. Like, do you feel that that's part of that conversation on learning ecosystems, or does it go even deeper into the community?
Well, two things here. One, yes, indeed, many of the learning ecosystems that exist today that we're looking at with WISE focus on skills generally, but more specifically, it's a lot about kind of 21st century skills, collaboration, communication, creativity, that everyone agrees is going to be really important for the workforce of tomorrow. Lots of learning ecosystems also focus on STEM, science, technology, and math, and a lot as well on kind of like digital skills, coding and skills like that. On the kind of credentialing question, it comes back to this idea of badges, and usually to try to explain that to people, if you remember when you were small and you were maybe a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout, or you have friends who were, at the Boy Scouts, if you learned to make a fire, you would get the actual little badge, the little thing you could pin, saying, well, Casey knows how to make a fire. It's really kind of the same idea, but 2.0, where the learning that's happening within learning ecosystems, you go and you learn something and you get a badge to be able to certify that learning, and for you to be able to demonstrate it to maybe your peers or your teacher or, potentially employers.
And so I'm curious about these badges. Like, is it with this micro credentialing, does it include assessments for doing certain things, and then you carry that on as you go into college and career?
Yes, the idea is for you to be able to develop your own kind of portfolio of badges. This is where, kind of links to question around personalized learning that's happening under learning ecosystems, the whole question of, learner agency for you as a learner to be able to take control, to have ownership of your learning. And then there are different badging systems out there that exist. Some are more, I would say, complex than others. So sometimes it's just you've participated in an activity, you get a badge. Sometimes it's you've participated, you get one level of the badge. If you've been able to demonstrate some type of learning linked to that activity, you have another level of the badge, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it kind of depends.
It's almost reminds me, I'm actually a pretty big video game fan. And it almost reminds me of like the badges that you get as you're leveling up your experience in a video game.
I'm not a big video game, but yeah, it's linked to that. But really, the side of you being able to have a portfolio and to be able to take it it's not just for your kind of your own sake or to show to your buddies, but also to be able to go and see an employer and say, I don't know, let's say I want to work in the automotive industry and I have no experience. I don't have the time or the resources to go to formal kind of training opportunities or go back to school or go back to college. Well, by learning with and by my community, I can develop part of those skills and be able to say, look, I don't have the quote unquote diploma, but I've done all these learning activities, which should be able to demonstrate to you through these badges that I do have some understanding of the industry, some understanding of the skills needed, and I have demonstrated the ability to master those skills.
And that speaks so powerfully to where I think education is heading in terms of, like you said, you don't need this piece of paper that said that you graduated from this particular institution that qualifies you for this. But I think it also shows to employers and to people you're with whom you're working. I have a vast amount of skills and the nuance to my being as a skilled person. Here's all my credentials. I think that really speaks to that. So I'm curious as to how do you see this as compared to current education reforms in the U.S. and abroad, broadly, I guess?
Well, first, maybe to say that, because I've heard this before, is that this whole kind of energy momentum around learning ecosystems is not saying that we're going to replace formal education with learning ecosystems. Learning ecosystems are really here seen as a way to augment, support, complement formal education, but not to replace it at all. Just want to clarify that for your audience. That being said, where it fits into lots of kind of global conversations around education reform is that, yes, it's a lot about lifelong learning in the sense of it's also about, people being, older adults, if you want, not just students, to be able to access these ecosystems, to be able to, to reskill, upskill, all the talk we're having right now around post-pandemic and people wanting to change jobs and things like that. So it's about lifelong learning. It's about really delivering on personalized learning. It's also looking at a lot of these, pedagogies like play-based learning, project-based learning. So it's actually trying to really kind of, I don't know if I could say it that way, but kind of take the best of a lot of these reforms and kind of try to bundle it together under this idea where you can also learn in your community. You can learn in school, but you can also learn in and with your community.
That's great. So tell our listeners about, so one of the things that we talk about a lot on the show is, so we have these reforms or we have these initiatives perhaps, and how does it work? So what kind of data do you have that says learning ecosystems are working and they're good for kids and adults alike?
Look, a really interesting question, because to my knowledge, and if people in your audience have seen something, please share it with me. But I'm still to find a kind of longitudinal, kind of long-term impact study of learning ecosystems on the actual learning outcomes. So this is still kind of in the works, and this is something we're just discussing with WISE of trying to work on. What I can tell you is that in terms of the learning sciences have made great progress in being able to understand the potential of informal learning, play-based learning, project-based learning. So there's a lot out there on that, which is really central to learning ecosystems. But on learning ecosystems per se, not that much, because this is still a relatively new kind of field and territory that people are working on. But back to the badges, and just in a few seconds, to say that the badges are a way. Many say that the badges are a way to potentially measure the impact of the learning,
sure.
at least short term and kind of like medium term. But the whole long term impact measurement of learning ecosystems is something we want to work on.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think I'm curious also to see, or to what has been your view on the extent to which the pandemic and school closures and across the globe has impacted the progress of learning ecosystems, or maybe has it strengthened the desire and the need for them?
I think both, in the sense of, people have realized around the world that education, the formal education sector was more fragile than we all thought, and that it didn't take that much to kind of close our schools, and that we needed to find kind of other ways, like more community-based ways to encourage that, that learning continues. Also, I think the pandemic has helped us realize the power and the potential of our communities and our neighborhoods.
Yeah.
The fact that we've had, that we couldn't move around, but had to rediscover actually, our back alleys, our local parks and everything else, realize that there's potential for more community-based activities at large, and hence for more community-based learning activities more specifically. So no, indeed, in a way, the pandemic has really kind of helped us push the envelope in terms of the conversation on learning ecosystems.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's helping us reimagine what education should and could look like, I think, across the globe, really. And we'd be remiss to not reevaluate what we have done in the past and what maybe hasn't worked. And what could be an addendum. As you say, we're not necessarily replacing traditional public schools or private schools. It's more of how can we strengthen and make it even more. I think the phrase you used was lifelong learners. We're always trying to push that for our students and our communities. How do we continue to do that? And learning ecosystems seem like it's on that path. What's next for learning ecosystems and for your work specifically with Eco6? And what do you hope to achieve? And what do you think it says about the larger changes of education in our society?
Well, I guess I'll mention WISE first, the World Innovation Summit for Education, where the big question we're trying to answer is that we're seeing more and more kind of research on learning ecosystems, more and more projects around learning ecosystems. What we feel is currently missing for those who see the potential and would like to kind of initiate a learning ecosystem in their communities, whether you're the director of a museum in Bangkok or, you're leading several schools in Guatemala or anywhere else, what we feel is missing is a kind of a toolbox, a kind of go-to hub with design principles, looking at, how do we get these different organizations to collaborate? What are the kind of leadership and governance models? What type of pedagogy could you be looking at? Back to the whole question around micro-credentials, which we're trying to develop this kind of, I wouldn't say database, but this knowledge hub of design principles to be able to share that with our wider community, to enable people who do want to design learning ecosystems to be able to do so. And as I was saying a few minutes before, also looking at how in terms of research, we can kind of improve what's out there and looking at pedagogies linked to formal curriculums, also, around kind of social capital.
Sure.
How does the learning ecosystem approach improve the social capital of the learners, and how can we measure it? And how does this help these learners thrive in life?
That's great. Well, Sebastian, before we close out our interview, I wanted to allow you to plug yourself a little bit. So tell our listeners about Eco6 and what you're all working on as an organization and where they can find you.
Well, so Eco6 is a small Canadian-based agency based here in Montreal, Canada. We work with, I would say, urban actors, whether that be cities or businesses or institutions such as museum, in designing urban ecosystems, with a big focus on learning ecosystems, of course. But to give you an example, we're also working with a host of organizations here in Montreal, looking at the potential for community-based learning through business events. Basically saying, all these cities around the world attract these big conferences, but what does that mean for the actual host community? If your city, right, Casey, hosts in 6 months from now a big conference on the future of mobility, or the future of education for that matter, sure, how does that actually impact your community? So looking at that, on how we can better think our events to ensure that they have impact.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Sebastian, for coming on the show. And I want to bring you back with Peter and Robby when they're not so busy in their administrative world. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to join us on Ed's Not Dead. And we want to get you back on the show another time in the near future. So thanks for joining us.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
Welcome back to Ed's Not Dead. Ed's Not Dead is still brought to you by Ed's Not Dead Media, a podcast media company that curates high-quality audio stories across a variety of genres. All right, boys, it is that time of the show where we have a quiz, Mr. Siddons.
Hey, do you want a quiz? There's two versions.
Well, I like the two forms.
I like the two forms.
Are you ready?
All right.
So one, there's names for them this time.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Am I supposed to be looking at the show notes? Is there something?
No. Okay. You ready?
Right.
So
the answers are in the
choose.
show notes.
Okay.
So, Pink or Floyd? Crable, which one do you want?
Pink. I'm Pink.
Which one's
Robby,
by the way?
Okay.
Which one's Pink? I guess I'll
which
be
one's
Floyd.
Pink? All righty. All right. Well, Pink is up first. You ready? Number one.
Live at Pompeii.
Oh, so these are not multiple choice, by the way. You just have to guess.
Okay.
If you want a multiple choice, you lose a half point.
So this hold on, I forgot how we did this last time. So this quiz is
just yours.
This is just
yours.
Five questions. 5 questions.
Three and three. All right, short and sweet. Number one: the United Nations condemned the Israeli bombing of a high-rise in the Gaza Strip that housed the offices of international media outlets, including Al Jazeera and the.
Good luck with that one.
Okay.
You want to multiple choice?
Yeah, I mean, that's a ridiculous.
A, New York Times, B, Associated Press, C, the Palestine Report, or D, MSNBC offices.
The Palestine Report.
It's actually the Associated Press.
I did not know.
Number two. No, go ahead. You can justify yourself.
No, this is fine. That's a dumb question, but go ahead.
Number two, House Republicans chose New York Representative blank to replace Liz Cheney as their third-ranked leader.
Okay, let's see if I can get her name right. It's going to be close. It's like Stefankis.
I'm going to take it. At least Stefanik.
Yeah,
I take it.
Okay,
well done, RD.
And wasn't she? I mean, wasn't she kind of anti-Trump, or at least a moderate Republican? And
she was a moderate when she came in, and now she had the Kool-Aid and the Mar-a-Lago Kool-Aid, and
the Kool-Aid tastes so good.
It tastes so good once it hits your lips.
The tipping point for her, though, was the election, right? I mean, even leading up to the election, she was
the impeachment.
Oh, the impeachment. That's right. Got it.
Yep.
Okay.
And
all right. So
she had a nice big swig of the Kool-Aid.
All right. Here's my chance to go 2 out of 3.
All right. Number 3. Colonial Pipeline paid nearly how many $1 million in ransom to hackers?
Million.
That is, well, it's 5 million, but yes, you got it.
Actually, I think it's 4.
They rounded up.
I think it's 4.4 million.
It was exactly 4.4 million, but they only
Wow.
rounded up in his
Jeez.
I was kind of into that story. I followed.
It was very interesting. Very,
It was
very interesting.
It was interesting. They totally capitulated to the hackers.
They did, and it's totally not there. It's going to mean they're not going to do it again.
Yeah. Yep. Well, they got paid, so they're good.
All right, 2 out of 3. 2 out of 3.
Not bad, not bad. All right, Mr. Crable. Number 1. The nation of blank successfully landed a rover on Mars, making it only the second country to do so.
Yeah, give me multiple choice.
All right. A, Russia. B, India. C, the United Kingdom. Or D, China.
I'm going to go with China.
China's correct. China's correct.
Well done. Lucky. I thought he was going to say Russia.
All right.
That was a strategic play, by the way, because I knew if I got a half point, I could still win 2.5 to 2. All right, go ahead.
That's a good point. Number 2, anger over a now withdrawn tax hike proposed by President Ivan Duque has morphed into massive protests against poverty, inequality, and police violence in blank. Dozens of people have been killed and many more are missing amid a brutal police crackdown.
Hey, by the way, hold on.
Yeah.
While you're thinking about it, I think there should only be a multiple choice lifeline on one question. He can't go multiple choice every question because that's what he's going to ask.
No, if I did, I'd only get 1.5.
Yeah, you lose a half point.
All right.
Can you spell his last name, please?
Duque.
Is it in South America?
I don't think I can answer that.
No hints. His name's a little like Sebastian Turbot.
Is it Canada? Is that what you're trying to tell me? I don't think it's Canada, Robby.
I'm just saying it might maybe.
Does Ivan have anything over his A, like an accent over his A?
Ivan, yeah.
I'm gonna go with. No, give me multiple choice.
All right. A, Chile. B, Peru. C, Colombia. D, Venezuela.
I'm going to go with Colombia.
Colombia is correct.
That is what I was going to say.
Mr. Crable.
Wasted half a point.
Number 3.
It's because you said it. It's so weird.
So so let me just do the math right here.
We can tie.
1 point. 1 point.
He's at 1.0 right now.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
I have to answer
this one.
He's got to get this one right. No multiple choice.
A blank named India that went missing in Houston for a week was found unharmed and was taken to a sanctuary.
That's going to be easy. I know that one actually.
Oh, then this is not my answer.
Don't tell it. Don't
say anything. Is it a dog, Robby? Look at me. Is it a dog?
I'm not looking at him. I refuse.
Is it a horse or a goat?
If he gets it wrong, Mr. Siddons, don't say it because I think I know what it is.
Is it an animal endemic to Texas?
No hints, Mr. Siddons.
I'm trying to break Robbie's poker face here.
He has no lifeline.
He turned the screen off.
Don't turn your screen off because I've been staring at you, so I don't have to look at Mr.
Something named India was returned to its owner. Is that what you're saying?
A blank named India.
Oh, I know this one. Tiger.
Tiger is correct. The tiger is correct.
You read him India again, and that's what did it. Oh, Mr. Craves, good pull. That was good.
Do you have a tiebreaker? I don't have a tiebreaker.
That was an example of test taking, of being completely like having no clue,
really no clue at all,
and then all of a sudden somehow your brain fires.
Came out of nowhere.
Power of association. He reread that to you, and you, bam.
It's crazy.
All right, good quiz. I think a longer form. Can we do 5 next time?
I'll work on it. I'll work on 5 and 5.
Okay, I do like
that.
I do like the
AB.
So what's so Pink and Floyd tied?
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. It'll be a different name next time.
Mr. Siddons, I was listening to Animals last night.
Oh, really? Great album.
Yes.
Great album.
Yeah. I actually think the more I listen to it, I think it's their best album.
Wow. Oh, so I disagree. You want to know what my favorite album is? Theirs is.
It's not going to be Division Bell. It's
Live at Pompeii.
No.
Well,
I love Live at Pompeii, but I like a studio album.
Wish You Were Here.
Nope.
The Wall.
Nope.
He's gonna go with something weird.
Okay, well,
What was pre-Animals?
Metal.
Oh, Metal. Metal's good.
Meddle.
Yeah, Metal's
I
good.
think it's such a great, well composed, well produced album.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back and we listened to that in high school, and I can't really remember it very well.
It's like a precursor. It was like trying out Dark Side of the Moon.
And what year was it?
I'm gonna say 70.
Okay, because Dark Side of the Moon.
Because Dark Side came out in 72.
72, right? And at one time, I don't know if this is correct. Maybe you all can look it up, you geriatric millennials. Since you're so
71.
October
of 71.
Dark Side of the Moon held the record for being in the top on the Billboard Top 100 or one of those for the longest time.
Until the Eagles.
I think it was way beyond that.
No, I mean the Eagles overtook them and Michael Jackson for the longest, or at the top of the charts, right? Or are you just saying like best-selling album overall?
Overall, I think it was. I don't know. I don't know how to frame the distinction, but it was a distinction that they held for a very long time. That was kind of like Russell Westbrook's triple-double breaking of the Big O. That it was a record no one thought would be broken, and then it was broken.
Yeah, 957 weeks on the Billboard's top LP and tapes charts.
Look at that!
How many?
1973, not 1972.
So 957 weeks.
Yes.
Has that been broken, or is that still the record?
907 weeks.
It's a lot of weeks.
Years. That's a lot of weeks. That's 18 years.
God.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah, I mean that was. So when you think of that album, that was quite the piece of work.
Yes, it was.
All right, that's enough down memory lane.
Yeah.
So that's pretty crazy. Geriatric millennial, Mr. Crable. Dark Side of the Moon was not even 10 years before you were born.
Yeah,
that's kind of crazy,
man.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
It is very, very interesting. And I was about to go to kindergarten. All right. You can find us at Ed's Not Dead PC. We always appreciate a tweet. Let us know what you're thinking about the show or something about education, and check out
Smash that subscribe button.
Yeah, smash that subscribe button, edsnotdead.com. Thanks again to Sebastian Turbot. It was great having him on the show. And stay tuned for more of our work with Wise Education. We've got big things in store. All right, boys. Any bold predictions? Anything interesting coming up that you're looking forward to? I'm sticking to my bold prediction, Mr. Crable, about the Lakers.
Yeah.
I'm sticking to that. The Wizards are playing tonight, so we got to get off this show.
And the Pacers? Did I look that up? The Pacers?
Yeah.
Playing
look at me.
Are they playing for the 9th slot or the 8th slot?
8. This is winning in or go home.
Yep, this is it. So what do you got going on? Summer is here. Capital Weather Gang, Mr. Siddons, officially said spring is over. It was exactly 8 weeks long.
Wow, that's pretty good. The spring down in Maryland generally are not very nice because they usually don't last very long.
Yeah, Mid-Atlantic springs are not very.
But this spring has been outstanding.
May was cool for most of the month.
It was really cool. Today was so hot. I was ready for it. I love hot weather, man.
I love summer. I love hot weather.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm with you. All right. Any exciting guest reveals before we go, Mr. Siddons, for anybody going to be on the show?
I have some in the hopper that I'm waiting to hear back from them.
Okay. All right. So,
but I don't want to expose any of my sources.
All right. Don't do it. All right, boys. It's great to see you. Thanks as always to our listeners. Spread the word about Ed's Not Dead. For Casey and Peter, we will catch you next time. Later, boys.